Rain is our story today with high snow levels. We're going to be watching the weekend continue to have these red days because we're still looking at rain and snow and a lot of weather impacts. Now, easing into next week, I'm still cautious because we've got everybody coming back for work and school in general with regular schedules. Some school districts still have an additional week off, but hey, we're going to see just a lot more activity. So any amount of rain on that critical Monday coming back could be problematic. So we got to just keep paying attention to the forecast until about Tuesday of next week. Now, this warmer storm is creating unusual circumstances considering that it's the first day of January. Here's what's so weird about this, by the way. I've been doing weather for a long time. Even I find this weird. Yesterday, during the day, it was cold. It was gray, and temperatures were in the 40s. Then with a storm coming in, you would think, well, the cold air is already there, so any precip on top of that is going to produce snow. But that's not the situation. Up high, there was much warmer air that was getting filtered in because of this southerly trajectory of the storm. So the snow levels actually were going up during the day, and they remain fairly high. Later today, potential for a few random thunderstorms with some breaks in the action because it's not going to rain all day as it's raining right now, which is very consistent, widespread, at least moderate to even heavy at times. We're looking at temperatures that are going to be coming up. We're still bringing in more warm air, so that warm air is moving down in elevation. We're going to end up in the upper 50s. Now, I do not think it's going to rain all day long. There's going to be some breaks here or there, but if you're venturing out, obviously, make sure that you're comfortable. Umbrella, rain boots. That way you know that you're prepared for any additional rain that's going to happen after the more steady rain today. And by the way, temperatures up by about 10 degrees compared to yesterday. So here's our situation through much of the day. On and off showers, some very high elevation snow down about 8,000 feet or so. So yes, the resorts are going to get a little snow mid-mountain and up. I think that's going to be beneficial, but you want it all the way down to the bases, and that's going to happen by early Saturday morning through much of the day. We're going to throw in Sunday as well, and we end up with 1 to 3 inches of valley rain, 1 to 3 feet of Sierra snow when you add up what we had yesterday through the rest of this week and this upcoming weekend. I'd also keep an eye. I don't think it'll be as heavy, but we still have some additional rain Monday into Tuesday. We're finally wrapping things up. Hello, I'm meteorologist Rob Carlmark here at ABC 10, and I want to take a deeper dive into Sierra snow because I think there's a lot of nuance and very specific things when we talk about snow that might just go over your head or it's not really important to you at the time, or things you may miss, or things that are really underreported, at least in my view. So hang with me. We're going to go through all of the very important details and things for after this report that you should look for in the forecast details, because it really can totally change how you view what the snow is, how important it is, what kind of snow is it, how it may impact you. There's a lot to it. Now, this is a subject near and dear to my heart because this is something that I'm in all winter long as much as I can, because this is the good stuff. You're looking for fresh snow, you're looking for light, fluffy snow, all the things that skiers like. But then for water resource folks, it's not necessarily their favorite kind of snow. So it all depends on how you look at it. Now, typically in our area, in Northern California, we talk about snow a lot, and it's for a lot of different reasons. If you don't ski or snowboard or sled and you just don't care and you view snow mostly as an annoyance or something that you just are not a fan of, this kind of snow that we get in the Tahoe region and other spots, that's our water in the summer, at least a third of it. So it really is something that we have to have. Otherwise, it's just life the way that we know it around here is not possible. Now, typically, when we show this to you in, say, a short morning, afternoon, or evening forecast, we'll show you this. The numbers will start to go up, and we're measuring snow in potential inches for well-known places, the mountain passes and some of the ski resorts. But there's so much more to it. So I want to start off this with snow levels. Snow levels are one of the main things that we focus on here at ABC 10 because that is the level, the elevation when we go from rain to snow. And this can have huge, monstrous impacts in how effective the storm is at producing snow where it needs to. Also, some of the things that might not be correct with the storm, things that are off. If the snow levels are really high and it's mostly rain, that completely alters the impacts, or if it's really low as well. So here is more or less a traditional storm as it comes in. It might be kind of cold in the beginning. We highlight these locations so you sort of have an idea of where the elevation is, because not many folks just off the top of their head will know where the elevation is if they're traveling through the mountains. So There's some well-known places. Lake levels, one I like to use a lot, that's 6,000 feet. That's for Lake Tahoe. And you can see here, it changes over time. Sometimes you might start off cold, and then all of a sudden it mixes in with rain up high. Then you have a rain on snow situation, so you get a lot of runoff, and that's a big impact for creeks and streams. And then usually it tends to lower at the very end of it as more cold air gets drawn in. So these are some of the things worth watching, is not just a static snow level, but how it changes over time. Here's another way of looking at it, and this idea came from the National Weather Service. Very effective, showing people, okay, on my drive, say on 80 between, say, Sacramento and Reno, where does the snow start? And this is a traditional cold storm where it's right around Blue Canyon. So you're looking at right around 5,000 feet of snow, and you can see that you usually tend to get more snow on the western slope versus on the backside here, the eastern slope or the Tahoe Basin. The reason for that is that as the storm rides up in elevation, it really is effective at wringing out more moisture, i.e. more snow. And then once it gets to the backside, it's still producing snow, but there's just not as much moisture as there is on the front side. And you see this through mountain ranges all over the world. Now, some of the primary hazards that we talk about with snow is driving through it. At least I think that's the biggest deal for most people. And you tend to get slick, snow-covered roads, poor visibility because it's big flakes. You can't see through it. You throw in some wind, it's really hard to see at times. You're going to get some travel delays. Obviously, chain controls is a big deal. For some people, this is the deciding factor. Chain controls, or putting on chains on two-wheel drive car, it's just a pain. It just is. That's why people happily pay to have somebody do it. It's just one extra thing you have to keep in your car and pay for, even if you don't use it, right? And then also, in the middle of a big snowstorm, even if you're prepared, hey, I know what I'm doing, I do this all the time, you still could end up in one of these long-lasting road closures, either due to visibility or loss of traction, or a double trailer truck crashes and it blocks the road. All of these things tend to happen, and they tend to happen a lot when it's snowing. So let me just take you through the easiest way to navigate driving through the snow in the Sierra and other spots all over the country. The number one issue, law enforcement will tell you this every single time you ask them what's going on the roads. They say speed is the number one issue. People drive too fast in the snow. Not only is the speed reduced in chain control areas as an advisement, it's the law. If you are speeding in chain control areas, they can issue a speeding ticket going 40 miles per hour if they want to, because it's unsafe for the road conditions. Also, when you have chains on your vehicles, this is the maximum amount of speed. If you go fast in that, you're going to lose chains. They're going to wrap around your axle, and it's going to be a bad time. So you need to have four-wheel drive cars, all-wheel drives, they're really good these days, or chains, and that's going to be on the axle that's moving the car. You have to know if it's a rear-wheel drive or if it's a front-wheel drive, and then you put the chains on those tires. That way you get the most traction. Number one tip, besides not speeding, is don't tailgate. There's a couple things that are going to happen there. Number one, if you decide to put on the brakes because people are going to slow down, do you have enough space? Because if your brakes lock up, you're sliding, then you're not in control anymore. It's just gravity at that point, and momentum and inertia is going to take over. So give yourself plenty of space. That way, whether they're braking or they're downshifting, which is very important during snow, that way you're going to have enough time to react. One of the things that tends to happen is that people follow very closely, and then folks that know what they're doing start downshifting. That's if in a manual vehicle, which is more rare these days, you just drop it down a gear and the engine's going to wind up. It's going to get loud, but it's going to slow the vehicle down without having to use your brakes. Because once you lock up your brakes, it's game over. When you downshift these days, they're usually paddles on your wheels. So figure out how to do that ahead of time. Don't learn in the mountains during a snowstorm, because you may not be doing it correctly, and that's going to cause some problems. Finally, when you do have to brake on turns and other means, you're just going to have to do it slowly. Just a nice slow pump during the straight part of the road, not during the turn part of the road, and you're going to have an easier time navigating during the snow. Now, let me talk again more about snow levels, because this is also another part that impacts driving and other things. When it's really low, when it starts to get down to 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, then you're bringing snow to places that can see snow, but not very often, and more populated areas. Camino, the Apple Hill area, Pollock Pines, Placerville, and that's just on 50. When you see low snow, then all of a sudden people that don't normally have to deal with snow, they've got to deal with snow. There's a lot of folks that are retired that live in the mountains because it's beautiful, cheaper cost of living, but guess what? You throw in a foot of snow in lower elevation spots, People may not be able to get out of their driveways. They may be snowbound in their home or residence or apartment, and that's a big thing. Also, we tend to see a lot of power outage issues. So that's another thing. If you lose power, you may not be able to run the heat in your home. So low snow, we tend to see a lot of those issues there. Traveling, obviously, chains and you have an emergency kit with you in lower elevation spots. Not many people are equipped with chains. If you live in Placerville, you're not usually dealing with chain controls. I mean, you may not even have them for your vehicle, but then all of a sudden you may need them to get up a steep driveway or what have you. So these are some of these other things. And then also it just changes all the time. Usually for the lower elevations, it'll be heavy snow and then rain and it mixes and the plowing is inefficient. Sometimes it's mostly up to private people. So it can just be a lot of headaches when there's lower snow. By the way, just for fun, we looked up the lowest snow in Sacramento. The last time we had a decent amount was back in 2009 with a trace of snow. Back in 1888, we had 3.5 inches. I want you just to imagine in your mind what 3.5 inches of snow would look like at 20 feet of elevation for a giant metro area with 1 million people. It would be a mess. Okay, here's another thing worth talking about. Snow density. Well, what is that? Snow is snow, right? Absolutely not. Snow is very different in the structure of it. And when you tend to look at snow, we get a lot of reports from ski areas and they tend to be at much higher elevations. So what they're going to get is colder air and a lot more inches of snow out of the same amount of liquid as lower elevations. So when the snow survey folks from the Department of Water Resources, they go out there, and these are some of the current numbers for this year, they will give you the inches of snow, but they also really want to know how much water is in that. In other words, if you melted the snow, how many inches of liquid do you have? Because that's how you measure water supply down the road. Also, the other thing worth mentioning is that the early season results, the percentages can be all over the place because you're dealing with less inches of snow in general. So big storms, lack of, or many of them all in a row can really skew these numbers. What you really want to look at for a good survey of the water that you're going to have for the year related to snow density is you really want to look at the April number. That's pretty much traditionally climate-wise. When everything starts to shut off, you tend to see less of the big snowstorms that could really change the snowpack and the water supply down the road. And this is where you really want to end up. The way that I like to view it, and it's always bad when a meteorologist is using a sports analogy, but I'm going to do it anyway. Think of these as quarters of a football game or a basketball game. You could be up, you could be down at the beginning. It's interesting. It kind of gives you an idea of where things are going, but look at this. For example, 23, 24, really slow to start. Hey, we ended up not only above average, but in solid shape. So it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Now, there's different things that will influence the density of the snow. Elevation, how close you are to the ocean, that's essentially how wet the air is going to be initially to start. But typically what you tend to have is when you have warmer temperatures and more moisture in the air in general, you tend to have wet and heavy snow. The nickname for that around here is called Sierra cement. But then when you have colder temperatures and drier air, but some liquid, you tend to have more fluffy snow, and it's more like a powder. The reason why is that there's more air in the snowflake, and it tends to stack up, so there's more distance. In other words, you can move it around, just dust it right off your car, versus the heavy stuff where you really have to put in some effort. So let's talk about the snow to liquid ratio. This is how we judge how fluffy the snow is. When it's very low, 1 inch of liquid equates to 7 inches of snow. When you tend to see this lower number, it's heavy and it's dense and there's a lot more water in it. Then you get more fluffy snow, and then when you have really cold air and just the right amount of moisture, then you get these 15-to-1, 20-to-1 snow ratios, and this is when it's really light, dry, fluffy powder. This is what skiers and snowboarders absolutely love. It's like floating on a cloud. It's amazing. However, the denser stuff, which is very important and useful and necessary for water supply, there's also other issues. A couple years ago, we had a lot of events with very heavy, wet snow. And, you know, it's one thing just shoving it off the road or off your vehicle, but you get storm after storm of this, and it really can add up to a lot of weight on your roof, especially on decks. And when it keeps happening again and again and again, if it's light, fluffy snow, it's not usually that big of a deal, but you can triple the amount of weight if it's that heavy, wet snow. That's exactly what happened in the Tahoe region a few years ago, and there were roof collapses and deck collapses all over town for a long time. So snow density is very important for many different reasons. And then finally, we just need to talk about snowpack. Snowpack is such a big deal around here because this is our water bank in the mountains that we rely on. Now, traditionally, when we think of water, it's the big reservoirs that we have. We look at how full they are, percentage of average. These are all very important numbers, but notice that you'll always are going to see a gap right here, and that is built in on purpose. The number one issue for that is for huge storm runoff. You need this buffer so you don't have the lakes overtopping its banks, either at the front or the spillways, the emergency spillways that we saw for Oroville not too long ago. So this buffer is very important. And the reason why it's built in and allowable and really by design on how they run these and manage all these dams is because you can rely on some level of snowpack. And so far for this season, you see various levels, but again, it's all about that April 1st average. Are we where we should be when we usually see these big colder storms shut off? And that's really the number that we're aiming for. So as you watch the snowpack during the year, pay attention to the average for the date. That does have some value, but really if you care about water for the long hot summer and going into drought, this is the number that all the real experts in this focus on. And the reason why is this: we've got our reservoirs. Then once the stormy season starts to wind down, you get less of those storms, they're going to allow more and more water to get stored in there. And those numbers are going to go up because they can count on the snowpack. And it's all the same. It's all the same on how it's managed from a conceptual basis, but then they all have to work together to manage snowpack. You might have massive snowpack in one area with a lot of runoff, and they might have little in another area, and they have to manage how this all works so that you have a sustainable and not dangerous flow for the ultimate destination, which is into the irrigation aqueducts, also for usage in local areas, and eventually even the big rivers like the San Joaquin and the Sacramento going out to the Delta and then out to sea. So it's a healthy ecosystem all across the state. Here's some final thoughts, because we've covered a lot of ground. Remember, when you're looking into the snow forecast, it's just my view, you should always seek for more information. If someone's not giving you snow levels or snow ratios or anything like that, find another place, because these are really important ways to understand how the snow affects you. Also, timing is one of the most important things. Driving in snow is just not that fun, and it can be really dangerous. So you want to watch for those dry weather windows. Make sure that people are focused on when it starts and when it ends, and then also a little bit of lag after it ends, so they can get the road down to the asphalt surface, and then it's much easier driving conditions. Driving is almost always your biggest issue. You got to go slow and steady. The other part of it is once you stop and you arrive at your destination, parking is always a challenge. Is it plowed? Is it a steep driveway? Do they have private plowing operations? Also, snow storage. Sometimes you have too much snow and there's just nowhere to put it, and you run into a parking issue, both at resorts and also just in parking lots at the grocery store for some of these high elevation spots. And snow is obviously a very big key to water in California. That snowpack, it's got to have density. If it's light and dry the whole time, you just don't end up with that much water out of it. And you can run into an issue where you have a lot of snow, but not a lot of water in the snow. And also the weather before and after the snowpack peak is really crucial. If you have a lot of heavy, wet, dense snow at the end of the season, it could be really helpful for your snowpack and your water supply. If it happens in March at the end, you're not too worried about more storms in the future, so they can really run those reservoirs up high toward the end of the season. Also, if you have a great healthy snowpack, but it gets really hot really quickly right afterwards in April and May, it can evaporate before it reaches its final destination. So all of these factor into the very complex and I think very interesting element of our local ecosystem here in California, which is the Sierra and the snowpack and how it relates to you, driving in it, enjoying it, and also our water during the long, hot summer. If you like these types of things, we've got all sorts of stuff here on ABC 10 Plus, including big 4-part specials where we cover water supply, we cover snow runoff, we cover almost anything you can think of, and very serious and very in-depth coverage from our weather team here at ABC 10 Plus. So have a look around. Hopefully you enjoyed this. There's lots more to see right here for free on ABC 10 Plus.